Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 1002. How does that feel to say of Stand Up with Pete Dominic? Joining me today, our great friend Tim Wise, anti-racist speaker and writer, and one of our all-around favorite people to talk about anything with. And today's conversation is no exception. Another great one with Tim Wise, and that is coming up at 25 minutes. But I just quickly want to thank you for all of your kind notes. So many people reach out to me, including many I haven't heard from in a long time, to say nice things about my conversation with Mark Nolte, which I posted for yesterday's episode, where Mark turned the tables, took the host microphone, and interviewed me. I very, very much appreciate each and every single message I got from all of you. I was a little bit worried about posting that. It was real personal and seemed very self-indulgent, but the feedback was real nice. So thank you very much for that. I look forward to hearing from more of you on it. Also wanted to mention today is Thursday. I'm posting this show on a Thursday, and on Thursday nights I host a hangout on Zoom. I hope to see you there. If you haven't been there for a long time, I miss you. I hope you're okay, and I would like to see you. And if you've never been there, come on out and introduce yourself to us. You'd fit right into our great group of thoughtful, brilliant, hilarious, kind, curious, generous folks who are joining us each and every Thursday night. New people all the time. Stop by. You don't even have to turn your camera on. It's a lot of fun. We have a lot of laughs, a lot of thoughtful conversations, and always cover a lot of ground. We were off last week, so I'm excited to see you tonight at the Stand Up with Pete Dominic Happy Hour Hangout. All right, that's news and notes. Of course, don't forget to watch my new stand-up special. There is a link in the show notes, and I hope to see you in Las Vegas for our first stand-up comedy, music, and podfest. Thank you very much to Cassie in Vegas for making all of this happen. March 22nd, 23rd, details coming soon on that event, but I'm really looking forward to that. All right, lots of headlines and some great audio clips for you. But first, this.
Hey there, stand-up listeners. If you like what you hear on this podcast, but not sure how to make it even more enjoyable, we have a solution. Sign up to become a stand-up Patreon member. You get all the benefits of the episodes you love, plus access to our members-only hangouts, as well as our amazing Patreon listener community. Patreon members like Dane in Butler, Pennsylvania.
I've been listening to Pete for many years now. He's down to earth, asks great questions of his guests, and is always open and vulnerable about his love for big hats and Crocs. Not that I'm a fan of big hats and Crocs, but the lack of shame is impressive.
You're not wrong, Dane, and thanks for being a subscriber. Go to patreon.com/Pete Dominic or visit the show's website at standupwithpete.com and click on the big red button that says Support Stand Up.
Yeah, thank you, Pete Coe. Thank you, Dane Winkler. You guys are the best. You want to make a promo, just email me and I'll set you up with Pete, standupwithpete@gmail.com. All right. Wow. Lots of news to get to. I'm going to skip the headlines and reactions over the Supreme Court decision in Colorado invalidating Donald Trump on their presidential ballot because of two things. We'll know soon what's going to happen here, and there's a lot of analysis that you can get elsewhere, and last night I covered it fairly thoroughly, and I'll ask a question to Tim Wise, and I'm sure most of my guests this week about it. There's so much other news that I wanted to get to that I'm just going to suggest if you want to learn more about that, it's super important. It matters a lot, but lots of great analysis, including how Republicans and MAGA Nation are reacting to it. I think that does matter. So what I'd like to start with is the Middle East, something much easier and a whole lot more fun. And it's that the leader of Hamas, or one of the leaders of Hamas, was in Egypt. He went to Egypt for a Cutco knife salesman convention and workshop, but no, he was obviously there for truce talks. The top political leader of Hamas in Cairo yesterday held talks with the Egyptian mediators about a possible truce that could lead to the release of Israeli hostages. And Israeli officials said that initial steps had been made in the negotiations. A senior Hamas official said that Israel would need to abide by a new sustained ceasefire and allow unlimited entry of aid into the Gaza Strip before Hamas would start discussing the release of more hostages. Israel believes that 129 people, mostly men, are still being held captive. And the latest U.S. message for Israel is coming from the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who said yesterday, the Israeli government does not have to choose between removing the threat of Hamas and minimizing the toll of civilians in Gaza, where nearly 20,000 people have been killed since the start of the war on October 7th. 20,000 people. It's insane. It's crazy. It's horrible. It's an obligation to do both, Secretary of State said. It has strategic interest to do both in remarks at a year-end news conference. And humanitarian groups are urging the U.S. and the Secretary of Defense, who is in the Middle East, to halt Israeli aid over Gaza operations. A group of prominent humanitarian organizations is calling on Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to halt military and other aid to Israel over its operations. They said that they have caused staggering civilian harm, according to a letter sent to the Pentagon chief today. The groups, including Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, urged Austin, the letter, to withhold U.S. assistance in accordance with U.S. law and policy that would facilitate violations of international humanitarian law and refrain from transferring explosive weapons to Israel for use in Gaza. The letter was also sent to the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor. So they're talking tough and making big demands at these very respected human rights organizations that have been around for a long, long time. So we'll see what happens with that, but the pressure is continuing to be put on Israel. I had a great conversation with Tim Wise about that as well during our conversation today. And in the Red Sea, the U.S. and a host of other nations are creating a new force to protect ships transiting the Red Sea that have come under attack by drones and ballistic missiles fired from Houthi-controlled areas of Yemen, according to the Defense Secretary. This was big news yesterday. The U.S. has reached a deal with the Venezuelan government to release an ally of their president, Nicolas Maduro, in exchange for the freeing of 10 jailed Americans and a group of Venezuelan political prisoners, according to Biden administration officials on Wednesday. That's right. We gave Venezuelan Fat Leonard, that's his nickname, in exchange. Famed fugitive Fat Leonard. Yeah, look into it. It's a rough nickname, but what are you going to do when you're that powerful? And Congress gave up yesterday, the Senate at least, the House already had, on a last-ditch bid to speed through emergency military aid to Ukraine before the end of the year as negotiators failed to cement a deal that Republicans have demanded, tying the money to a crackdown on migration across the U.S. border with Mexico. So that is real bad news for, well, everybody. And in an obvious call, a federal judge yesterday allowed Arlington National Cemetery to remove a century-old Confederate memorial one day after blocking the removal over a report that grave sites would be disturbed. So they reversed that earlier decision, which I actually did mention here in the news update a couple of days ago. But at a hearing yesterday in federal court, the new judge said that he actually toured the site before the hearing and saw no desecration of any graves and that the grass wasn't even disturbed. So how about that? Another Confederate monument gone. And I think that's progress. I think that's what we call progress here. Big news in Europe on immigration policy. After 3 years of negotiations, European Union countries reached a deal on migration aimed at allaying pressure from far-right political parties. The European Union yesterday broke years of political deadlock by agreeing on a deal that will significantly change how the bloc limits migrant entry, moves migrants around the EU countries, and effectively makes it easier to deport unsuccessful asylum seeker applicants. Really fascinating and very, very important story, this deal being hailed as historic, and the agreement still needs to be formally ratified, but major news for European Union and those who want to migrate there. Also, file this one under the good news section of the news segment. New York City banned uses of solitary confinement. More good news. It's torture. New York City officials voted yesterday to ban uses of solitary confinement in city jails. The mayor, Eric Adams, vowed to veto the measure because he likes torture, but the bill's supporters have said that they have enough votes in the city council to overrule his opposition. So I thought that was really good news and progress as well when it comes to human rights. Warner Brothers and Discovery are in talks to merge with Paramount Global, which would create a mega entertainment and media company, and that would be really bad. That would be a bad thing. David K. Johnson tweeted about that yesterday, saying the trend toward monopoly, or at least oligopoly, continues to be the detriment of consumers, creators, and workers. With less competition, owners win, collecting excessive profits while creating a dead weight loss for society. This is part of corporate socialism, and it is bad. David K. Johnson, I Always want to know what he has to say about this. And finally, and this is a pretty important story, COVID, flu, and RSV hospitalizations are spiking across the country. CDC is reporting that hospitalizations for all ages groups from the flu, COVID, and RSV have spiked over the last 4 weeks. And I think that is where I will start with the audio section of the news segment. Here is Dr. John Torres on NBC News, medical director, contributor, talking about it.
I'm joined now by NBC News medical contributor, Dr. John Torres. Dr. Torres, thank you so much for joining us. Let's just start with these numbers. Obviously, a lot of people expect to see an increase in the flu, RSV, even COVID during the winter months. But when you look at these numbers, they're pretty high. I won't name names, but I feel like I know a lot of people right now that are like, oh, I think I have the flu. I found out I have the flu. Are these numbers concerning?
Yeah, they're numbers you certainly want to pay attention to. And if you go anywhere, you're going to hear coughing, sneezing, people that are just sick. And this is not unlike the past couple of years where we had the triple-demic happening. We're not quite at that point yet. But if you think about it, two of these viruses, flu and RSV, they're seasonal viruses. So we're seeing the seasonality of them happening now in the winter. COVID is a year-round virus, but it also has seasonal spikes, and that's what we're seeing as well. And so that triple combination there, along with the fact that we're getting together over the holidays, we're going in more transportation type situations where we're enclosed in either airplanes or subways or buses, it's going to spread more, and we think it's going to spread more over the next couple of weeks.
What are we seeing with COVID right now? I know there's this new variant, JN1. The CDC has described it as the fastest growing variant. What makes that different than other variants we've seen so far?
And the World Health Organization came up with the same thing, saying we need to pay attention to JN1 because that's going to be the variant that's going to start overtaking all the other ones. And right now it is quickly moving. And the thing that's different about it, so this is an Omicron subvariant. In other words, it comes off Omicron variants and it's a lower level of that. It's changed enough to the point where it's more infectious and we think it can break through some of the vaccines. But luckily, the vaccines are still giving us that ultimate protection of keeping us from being hospitalized or dying from this virus, which is at the end of the day what we want to happen. But the fact it's more contagious means it could spread more. And like I mentioned, during the holidays we'll be getting together, so you have to be cautious about this.
So let's talk a little bit about vaccinations, because the rate of vaccinations for all sorts of things, a lot lower based on the data that we have than it was in 2022. Why are people backing off of vaccines?
So if you look at flu vaccines, they're kind of the normal range of vaccines, which is still pretty low. COVID is extremely low right now for the booster shots. And I think part of what you're seeing is kind of vaccine fatigue. People are saying, I have plenty of COVID vaccines. I don't need any more. But because of these new variants, they do. The other thing to realize is with vaccines, it takes 2 weeks for them to become fully effective. And so some people, I think, might be saying, well, it's too late for the holidays. I'll get it later on. But the truth with the vaccine is every day you have the vaccine, you're more protected than you were the day before. Yes, it does take 2 weeks, but even a couple days will give you some protection.
Okay.
All right, there you go, Dr. John Torres. He must be a big pharma shill the way he is touting those vaccines, huh? Appreciate that update. That's NBC News, and that is where I will begin with audio clips for you. I've also got something that I find quite triggering. I like to throw in a couple of these, not because I want to trigger you. I do think it's important to hear what they're saying over on Earth 2 as much as we can stomach it. And here is something terrible, and so terrible it's kind of funny if you can try to laugh at the sad, pathetic Kellyanne Conway on Fox News trying to get people's attention with a real bizarre and deeply, deeply offensive rant against liberals.
Trump on those grounds, or that he's been convicted. So it is in doubt. And when you look at what I just think the Democrats wake up every morning, Emily, and they look at the calendar. The iPhone says January 6, 2021. The date never changes. And then they get an electric vehicle and go get an abortion. I just described the Democratic Party to you in 7 seconds.
All right. There you go. We get up every morning, get in our electric cars, and get an abortion. Oh, I had 2 abortions this week. I was going to be, but my electric car didn't start. So looks like I'm going to have to stack them up for next week. All right, well, Kellyanne Conway, former Trump administration communications, whatever she was over there, hack and poison demon. She's a demon. She is still obviously carrying water for Donald Trump. You know who isn't, though? It's his former attorney general who absolutely did carry his water and defend him against the Mueller investigation and dismissed all the obstruction of justice charges. Well, yesterday he was on CNN with Jake Tapper, And this was his reaction to the former disgraced president's new rhetoric about immigrants and others.
I'm offended by it because it has racist overtones. I actually feel, as you say, we have to control the border, and a lot of people coming across the border from anywhere in the world, we don't know where they're coming from. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is that the Hispanic Americans that have come up from South America have made great citizens. You know, they have strong values, they're entrepreneurial. My son-in-law was a Marine combat officer, and he said the best Marines in his unit in Iraq were recent Hispanic immigrants. So I don't like these racist overtones. In the broad sweep of history, the fact that we have a reservoir to our south of these people who come out of the Western tradition, they're religious people, good family people in general, is a boon to the United States. Does that mean they all are like that? No. And does bringing in a lot of people at once from a different country, does that put strains on our system and harm the country to an extent? Yes, it does. But the attacks on the idea that they pollute our blood, I think are foul.
All right, there you go, Bill Barr. Well, if you read between the lines, you know Bill Barr. You know that he is a very powerful, influential Catholic, and a lot of those people coming from those places are also Catholic, and we need Catholics, so I guess we'll have to compromise on other parts of their ethnicity. That's what my cynicism heard when I was hearing Bill Barr defend that. But I did like what he said about his son and quoting the guys that he fought with in Iraq as being the best war fighters. I thought that was pretty good, and I appreciated it, but don't appreciate him. Nonetheless, still matters. All right, let's check in with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who yesterday thanked journalists and reflected on the dangers they faced in the year 2023.
Let me just say this. I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you, to thank our press corps, those present in the room and those outside who may be listening in. This has been an extraordinarily dangerous year for press around the world. Many killed, many more wounded, hundreds detained, attacked, threatened, injured, simply for doing their jobs. And yet, you've persisted. You stayed at it. And I am immensely grateful for that. To all the reporters here today, with whom I've clocked a few miles this past year, your relentless efforts to ask tough questions, often multi-part, and get accurate, timely information to people around the globe is a true public service. It's vital that you continue to do that because it's so important to everything that all of us care about. Informed, engaged citizens, truth, accountability, democracy. And you do it in a way that humanizes people in an ever more dehumanized world. So, I'm profoundly grateful to you for the work that you do, even if I don't always show it.
All right, Antony Blinken trying to express his gratitude and respect to the press corps there yesterday here at the end of the year. That is a common tradition amongst a lot of civil servants and cabinet secretaries to the press corps, covering them. Smart thing to do. I'm not sure that was done during the Trump administration when they were the enemy of the people. Speaking of Trump, I don't know when the last time I played Eric Trump was, but you got just listen to this 14 seconds of Eric Trump with me. And then I'll tell you something crazy at the end after it's back.
Could you imagine if I was doing shady deals and I was sending money to Barron's bank account? Barron at 15 years old would be in jail. I would be in jail. My father would be in jail. Frankly, we wouldn't even have a trial. The trial would be over before it even started. Could you?
Well, it's just that Barron is 18. Going to be 18. He's not 15. But, maybe he got it wrong. Maybe he meant like if he was doing those deals years ago, like Hunter apparently was doing. But it does sound like he has no idea how old his younger brother is. Okay, that's enough from stupid Eric Trump. Now let's check in with the President of the United States. He just got off his airplane. He's coming over here to talk to reporters. What will they ask him?
Is Trump an insurrectionist, sir?
Well, I think certainly it's self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported an insurrection. And no question about it. None. Zero. And he seems to be doubling down on about everything. Anyway, I've got to go do this.
Didn't it sound like he said, I gotta go do this crap. It sounded like he said that.
I've got to go do this.
I mean, I'm sure he didn't say, I gotta go do this crap, but in case you didn't hear the reporter, she screamed, is Donald Trump an insurrectionist? And Joe Biden realized he'd been talking about Donald Trump for his limit that he possibly could before he wanted to, like rest of us, vomit because he couldn't believe that he was the president of the United States, and he punched out after about 20 seconds. All right, I like to end the news segment with some comedy, some smart comedy, always great, from the great Trey Crowder. We love the liberal rednecks, and Trey Crowder is one of the funniest, smartest guys out there, making these hilarious and brilliant videos in his car. And here he is with a Merry Christmas and Hail Satan to y'all 2-minute rip.
Christmas video, because 'tis the season, y'all. It's only 5 days away. I want to put this little missive out there and ask y'all this Christmas season, don't forget to set aside some time and praise the Dark Lord Satan in his unholy name. That's right. Feel the malignant spirit, baby. The most fetid of blessings indeed. No, I'm just kidding. Satan ain't real, obviously. But it hasn't stopped him from having quite the moment this Christmas season. Satan's been everywhere. They had a Satan statue at the Iowa State House. They got all these after-school Satan clubs popping up around the country, all of which is threatening to collapse the global pearl economy on account of all the clutching that Christians are doing over it, which is how you know it's working. Of course, none of it's actually Satan. It's the Satanic Temple, which is an organization that advocates for benevolence and empathy, opposes tyrannical authority, and encourages practical, common sense thinking. So right off, you can see why Christians can't stand them. Right? But no, that's why they do these things. They do these things to illustrate important arguments about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, right? That's what they're about. It has nothing to do with a red-skinned pitchfork feller running around trading souls for fiddle lessons and shit. It ain't that. So you might ask, well, why use Satan at all? Well, because it works, right? If the organization was called the Sane Person's Club for Making Sense and Doing Good, nobody would have ever heard of it. But they understand that Christians cannot resist a moral panic, especially one of the satanic variety. And now nearly every American is aware of their cause. The Satan stuff just works. It also has the added benefit of being metal as fuck. So there's that too. Their merch is way more kick-ass this way. But Christians, anytime Satan ever comes up, they lose their minds, they freak out, they think it's a threat to Christmas and their way of life and all they hold dear. Christians, I have a very important message for you. Listen to me. Please listen to me right now. Look at me. I'm a boring suburban family man, married, father of two. I love Christmas, love it. Eulist of tidings, gayest of apparel, all that. I bake gingerbread houses for all the grandkids every year from scratch, bitches. That's the Christmas energy I'm bringing to the table. Wholesome AF. That's me. I also love Satan. Love him. Big fan. Why? Bunch of reasons. He parties hard, shreds guitar, dresses sharp as hell, never gets offended, unlike y'all, and most importantly, and I really cannot stress this enough, is not actually real, and I understand that. That's what y'all need to know about those of us Americans who are on the side of the Satanic Temple. We're not actually worshiping devils. We're not eating babies. I've had 2 babies of my own in the house with me for the past 12 years. I ain't ate them yet, and I can't even walk through the kitchen without stopping for 2 more Christmas tree cakes, right? Like, we're just regular people, okay? We're not trying to bring about the end times. We're not trying to make it rain blood, although if it was accompanied by purple lightning, that would be kind of rad, but that's not what we're trying to do. All we're trying to do is push back on y'all a little bit, and if we can, prevent you from shoving your beliefs down everybody's throat all the time. That's it. But with that said, I sincerely do hope that you have a very Merry Christmas, because my Satan-loving ass is going to. Love y'all.
Yeah, Trey Crowder killing it, as he always does. You gotta love that guy. One of the smartest, funniest guys out there, second to very few. I think he's top notch. Love him, and always happy to share his stuff, and should probably get him back on the show in 24, eh? Well, that's all I've got for you for the news. Now it's time for the interview. Tim Wise is one of the all-time greats here on Stand Up. His anti-racism work traces back to his days as a college activist in the 80s, fighting for divestment from apartheid South Africa, and brings him all the way through so many books and so many speeches, appearances on radio and television and podcasts like mine, and he's one of my all-time faves. I don't know what to tell you much more about him than that. He is one of the best writers and speakers I know. He's become a really good friend of mine, and I always love to talk to him. We did talk about his reaction to the Colorado Supreme Court's ruling and our once authoritarian and potentially future authoritarian leaders' new Nazi rhetoric, the Arab-Israeli conflict, his thoughts on that, which are really interesting, provocative, and important, and his thoughts on Taint Week. All right, folks, you're going to love it, and I'm really excited to have Tim back anytime he's able to join me. Let's do it right now with Tim Wise. There he is, everybody. Coming soon to Substack, to TikTok, everything. We're doing the full court press. I'm insisting that you're everywhere. I get you as much as I can. We need you everywhere. So you're committing to it on the record.
That's the plan for 24. Yes, I'm just limping to the finish line of this year, but 24 is going to be that. It's going to be all about.
We're going to build you a whole studio, and I want you on air all day long, exhausted after every day.
I'm ready for that.
Of content creation a la Tim Wise. There's so much that I always wanted. That's why I'm happy that you're, wherever you are, I'm always happy that you're there, including still on Twitter. And I want to ask you about that and Elon Musk. But first, let's get to the most topical, relevant news. I just want to get your general take on what your thoughts are around the state of Colorado, their Supreme Court invalidating Trump because he's an insurrectionist, this originally conservative idea about Donald Trump in particular. The Supreme Court's decided he's not going to be on the ballot. All the legal experts I follow, trust, and respect say, well, it's going to go to the Supreme Court and quickly, and they're going to invalidate that, and it'll all be for naught, and we won't see a bunch of states kicking him off the ballot. But what are your thoughts about it legally, politically, and for MAGA in general?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough to know that the legal logic in the decision, I read it, it makes sense. I doubt very seriously that anyone can say with a straight face that the framers of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, or Article 3, or whatever, I guess Section 3, didn't want this to include the president. I mean, the arguments being made is, well, he's not an officer of the United States. Right. Do you really think that in the wake of the Civil War, what they were saying was, well, everybody is barred except Jeff Davis? Like, Jeff Davis can run again. Jeff Davis could run and be president, but the rest of them, no, we don't like them. But Jefferson Davis is fine. Come on. Like, they use language the way they used it. It's imprecise. It may be ambiguous. I think it's pretty obvious what they intended. And if the Supreme Court meant what it says about following the intent and the text and the true language of the Constitution, they would uphold what Colorado did. But of course, they aren't serious about that, except when it serves their reactionary purposes. So they probably will overturn what Colorado's done. Now, here's the bigger issue, though, politically, which I think is where I'm at with this. I think you can make a good legal case for what the Colorado court did. And if the Supreme Court upholds it, I would say that there's a good legal case. But I think this might be one of those, I hope I'm wrong, but it might be one of those things where you got to watch what you wish for, right? Because you just might get it.
Yeah.
Because, first of all, remember, this lawsuit was brought by Republicans. Republicans who didn't want Trump on the ballot. Now, do they not want him on the ballot because they want Joe Biden to be president? Or do they not want him on the ballot because they want the Republican Party to pivot to somebody else they think is more electable than Donald Trump? That's the answer. So I don't know who's more electable. Polls are up and down. Polls sometimes say Trump's going to win against Biden, sometimes not. Polls say that Biden can beat Nikki Haley. Others say that he can't. I am much more nervous, to be honest, about a Nikki Haley-Joe Biden matchup than I am a Trump-Biden matchup. I'm obviously scared shitless about a Trump presidency, but I'm more concerned about the ability to get Joe Biden, who is limping to the election at this point, not literally, but like in terms of his support levels right now and enthusiasm. I don't know that, if it's someone who's not an insurrectionist like Trump, do a lot of those Republicans who don't like Trump say, well, I'll vote for Nikki or I'll vote for Chris?
But that's only one. That's the most potentially realistic outcome, but the more maybe dangerous one. And maybe you were going to say this if I didn't jump in, but the question is, like, be careful what you wish for. If a whole bunch of states were to invalidate Trump and he couldn't be on the ballot and the Supreme Court did not overturn it, not only would you more likely have a potential Nikki Haley or any other Republican, which is scary because they might be more likely to beat Joe Biden. That's what you're saying. The kind of divisiveness and danger that poses for, I think, civil unrest and violence, that they're going to keep the king off. You're already seeing the verbal reactions. I'm sure there will be violence, but more importantly, some people are saying, then they will invalidate the next Democrat for the same reason, even though they hadn't led an insurrection. Like, if we do it, they'll do it. What do you make of those points and arguments that others?
You can't. I think it's hard to just accuse somebody of insurrection when there isn't anything that even remotely.
Well, they're impeaching Joe Biden. I don't know about that. They're impeaching Joe Biden for shit his son did, like, before he was president. And so I think they can do anything. I mean, but you don't not do something because some people won't like it. We have laws.
Well, except that you would have to have a court agree. That, I mean, the reason this can go forward is because you've had a couple of courts now who have said he engaged in insurrection. I mean, that's now, like, no one has really disputed that among
even the
judges.
Conservatives. Yeah.
And so it's not just because Marjorie Taylor Greene says, well, Joe Biden, it's insurrection at the border. No, that's not the definition. No judge would say that was the definition. No court would agree that's the definition. So that concern is not as big. The violence concern. Look, the violence concern is big. If they don't make Trump a permanent president and then let little Donnie Jr. be his running mate or his follow up president, they're gonna want to burn stuff down. They want to make him emperor, like some of these people. It's rather obvious. So the threat of violence is always there if he doesn't get his way. But the bigger concern for me is I just am not confident. I mean, look, I don't like the thought of Trump Biden because it could be Trump, right? If I knew for a fact that Biden was going to lose, I'd want it to be anybody but Trump,
right? For
the most part. But I don't know for a fact Biden's going to lose. I think Biden might win against Trump because the anti-Trump vote is so large. I don't know that the same anti-Nikki Haley vote or anti-Ron DeSantis vote, or it's not Vivek, forget him. But I don't know. It's a question of, are there more Trump people who will refuse to vote for any of those folks? Or are there more folks who would vote for one of them than would have otherwise voted for Trump? And I just don't know the math on that. So this is one of those moments where you go, shit, I hope they got it right.
Yeah, well, we'll see, I think, pretty quickly about that. Yeah. But I think you make obviously great points, and it's an important issue to continue watching. I want to ask you about the former disgraced president's rhetoric. He's dialed it up a notch. He's really quoting Hitler. He's really leaning into the old authoritarian playbook, and historians and experts on this, including yourself, looking at the history for all of this, have been screaming, look at what he's doing. Don't look away. Watch it. He's telling us what he's going to do. And the latest, of course, is that immigrants are polluting the blood of America. He specifically cited the black and brown countries, or as he referred to them while president, was it? Or shithole countries. And so I just wanted to get your take. We've heard from a lot of people, but it's really one of the main things I wanted to ask you about is this rhetoric and how far he's gotten and what it means when someone has to say, anyone, no, I did not own Mein Kampf and have it on my bed. He didn't say he
didn't own it. He said he didn't read it. And of course he didn't, because there are no pictures. He didn't read it because there are no pictures and charts.
Colbert had a funny joke where there's a children's version of Mein Kampf. Yes. And so maybe he did.
Yes. Well, but here's the thing. What's funniest about it, nothing funny, but what is funny about it, I guess, is that no one ever really said that Hitler said that in Mein Kampf.
Right.
They just said Hitler said it. And he's like, I never read Mein Kampf.
He told on himself, maybe.
But you sound like you might have read the wiki version.
Yeah.
Because you sort of knew it was in there, Look, I don't think there's any question that he is deliberately choosing words like this, or his speechwriters are. He knows what works with his crowd. And that's the biggest thing, right? Whether or not you believe Donald Trump sat down and said, oh, I'm going to crib Hitler tonight. What he knows is using rhetoric that is incredibly belligerent, hateful, xenophobic, racist, all of these things. He knows it plays, right? It's not enough anymore for him to say, build that wall, build that wall. It's not enough for him to apparently call people rapists and murderers and drug smugglers. Right now, it's like, oh, that's so 2016. Now we got to make it about literally poisoning the blood. And he obviously, for those who would say, well, it's not racist because he's married, immigrants. Yeah, he married an Eastern European fembot who has polluted his own bloodline, but it's not the same because it's European. It's European. She's a white person in his mind, and therefore, and in the racial taxonomy of the West, and therefore it doesn't count. So it's obviously he's talking about black and brown folks. He's talking about those who are not, his next wife or
it's so
potential
lame.
wife.
I mean, you taught me this years ago, but it's so lame. It's like, I don't hate women. I married one. I'm not anti-immigrant. I have one that works for me. I like the idea that you married a person or are friends with a person or whatever that belongs to that category does not mean that you don't support systemic policy against their families or people.
It would be like Donald Trump saying, I'm not a sexist. I love women. Look at how many I've grabbed, by the pussy, basically.
Right. Look how many I've assaulted. I love them so much. I hurt them.
Right. Exactly. So I think that we know what he's saying, but the bigger question is not that he's saying it. It's the fact that so many people hang on that. And what's been most disturbing about the last few months of his rhetoric, whether it's that stuff or whether it's I'll just be a dictator on day one, wink, wink, isn't that funny, is first of all, Donald Trump is not a stand-up. You know this. We all know this. This is not open mic night at the Improv. What the fuck are you doing? Like, you're not funny. You don't ever laugh or smile. You didn't even crack a laugh or crack a smile at the correspondence dinner where Obama roasted you. Well, you couldn't even, you can't take it. If you can't take a joke, you can't tell a joke.
That's right.
Right? That's just
Those
standard.
Right.
And it is a rule. And so he's not funny. He's not saying it for funny. He's saying it because he knows that there are millions of his people who love that shit. Now, is it a troll? Sort of, yes. Is he trying to troll the libs and get us all stirred up? Oh my God, he's going to be a dictator? Yes. But what he's also doing is playing to a group of people who he's trying to normalize that for. He's trying to essentially say, I would never really do that. But then if you actually were to ask those fans at those rallies, this sort of the Trump deadheads or whatever they are that follow him everywhere. If you were to ask them, well, what do you think about him saying he wants to shut down NBC for criticizing? What do you think about when he says he wants to fire all the civil servants and make them all political appointees? I don't think anyone in his rallies would go, well, he's not really going to do that. No, they would want him to do that.
Sure.
Well, that's dictatorial action. That's authoritarian action. The fact that I read today, someone said, one of his Latino supporters in Florida said, well, I know he's not Hitler. Jesus, it's not about whether he's Hitler. It's about whether or not he's using rhetoric to normalize anti-democratic, small d, anti-democratic policies. And he is. And the more he says it and the more the media refuses to weigh in on it other than the horse race of it. Is this going to help him or hurt him? What is this doing to him in the polls? Instead of making a concerted statement where they talk about the thing, you and I know that he says these things. And if you spend a lot of time on social media where folks talk about it, you know that he says these things. But a lot of the mainstream press in the last several months has not been talking about some of that racist rhetoric, has not actually focused on it the way that we do. So if you're just average person out there and you're not paying attention, you have no idea that he's saying this stuff. If you go to his rallies, you do, and you're into it. If you're the kind of person who's out there who doesn't really like him and, you don't know how you're going to vote in 2024, you need to understand what the man is saying. And it may seem weird to think that people don't know, but a lot of folks are not following what we're following. And it's the job of the New York Times and the Washington Post and others to talk about that. But they're talking about that less than they are Joe Biden's age, right? Far more articles about Joe Biden's age, which is just 3 years older than Trump, neither one of whom are necessarily at their peak sort of cognitive level. No offense to either of them, but they're not. We all fall off as we get older, and both of them have. But they have far more articles on how old Joe Biden is or how he stumbles in his speeches than they do about the horrible fascistic things that Donald Trump says. And then, of course, the media will say, well, we're trying to be neutral and objective and show both sides. No, both sides would be like, oh, he said some Nazi shit again. Well, we need to report it. We need to report it. It doesn't mean that the New York Times has to do like a full page thing where it's like, here's all the reasons he's wrong. I mean, I wish they would, but at least report that he said it.
I agree with that criticism. There can never be enough. But do you also agree that this time around, the mainstream corporate media, New York Times, Washington Post, those that still are respected in many circles, are doing a lot better job at saying what exactly is happening than they did the first time, that people like you and I saw what was coming and they didn't?
I think they're doing better than 2016, but that's a pretty low bar. I think they're doing worse than 2020. I think there was a lot more. I mean, and again, I haven't done a content analysis to prove that, and I don't know that I could, but just based on sort of what I can recall and what I'm seeing now, I feel like they've fallen back into that, not as bad as 2016 mode, but somewhere between that and 2020, where they really need to be considerably more consistent about demonstrating the unacceptability of the things that he says and the absurdity of what he says. I mean, so we'll see. But I think that's the bigger question we need to be asking is, why are there so many millions of people who respond positively to even someone joking about being a dictator? I mean, can you imagine if Barack Obama, in response to the allegation that he was a secret Muslim who was planning a caliphate run from Saudi Arabia or whatever, if he had been like, yeah, I'm going to do that, but only for like a week, and then I'm going to stop. Like, nobody, and Barack Obama actually can tell a joke, unlike Donald Trump. Barack Obama actually does have a sense of humor and comedic timing. But if he had said that at the Correspondents' Dinner or just in an interview, like, yeah, I'm sort of gonna be a Muslim fundamentalist dictator. We're gonna establish a caliphate. It's gonna be Sharia, but only for like 1 week. And then the women can take the burqas off again.
Well, I mean, it's kind of interesting because people were screaming that that's exactly what Obama would do. And it was always insanely stupid and ridiculous. But, a lot of people believed it. A lot of people believed, of course, that Trump would do stuff, too. But the difference is he did it. He done it. The Muslim ban. Like, people, I don't even think anybody predicted a Muslim ban. Like,
right.
Day
and the things
one?
he didn't do, and the things he didn't do are the things he didn't do because there were still normal people around him. Normal people who were like old school right wing people. Yep. I mean, it's sad that that's normal, but it is. Like, the Bill Barrs of the world and the Jeff Sessionses of the world are horribly objectionable on their own terms, but they reined in the most fascistic instincts of this guy. It's not going to be that. It's going to be Stephen Miller as the attorney general. It's going to be Steve Bannon in some other,
but
again,
I think the problem and solution that they saw then was, even those who were sycophants of the president then, including cabinet secretaries, when he went and ordered his Secretary of Defense or Commerce or State to do a thing, they'd be like, listen, I'd love to be able to do that. I wish I had the power, but that's not even my job. I can't do that. But they want to do is recreate the administrative state so that there isn't any obstacles in their way of doing the thing. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, they would say, wish I could do it, but it's not my job. You're going to have to ask that guy, and he's going to have to get his entire agency to break rules and responsibilities. But now they're trying to recreate that through courts, and they may very well be able to do a lot more because of that.
Absolutely. No, that's the real danger. And I think the question we need to be asking is why are so many people so done with democracy as a concept?
What is your answer?
Well, I think, look, on the one hand, it's the truth that there are millions of Americans who don't feel that their voice matters, who don't feel that they have any power, whether it's at work or in society more largely. We're an atomized society. We're all sort of in our little silos, and it can be very alienating and very isolating. So the best case answer, the most optimistic, is that people have legitimate concerns about their feelings of efficacy, their feelings of effectiveness in their lives. And when you feel that democracy isn't working for you, shit's not working out for you, your life isn't going the way you thought it would, then maybe you're like, well, what good is this anyway? Like, I vote, and people become more and more cynical about voting. They say, doesn't change anything. So why even engage in it? Well, it's a very short stroll from that rhetoric and that sentiment to saying, well, why do we even have elections? Like, what's the point? Right? Not just why do I vote, but why even have them? Right. And so I think there's a cynicism that has sunk in our culture. And I understand it. I understand why a person would be cynical about political change. I'm someone of the left who is frustrated every day, every hour, every month, year. I'm never happy at the end of an election because I always know it's going to be a compromise thing. But I'm also realistic to understand that's what politics is.
I think.
But I think a lot of people are not in that space. And that's why people now are like, well, I won't vote for Joe Biden because of Gaza. So what, you would rather have Trump, who will absolutely kill every Palestinian? He'll have Jared Kushner push the button. These are people who just ignored the Palestinians in their Abraham Accord peace talks, just acted like they didn't even exist, because to them, they don't exist. So if you're really going to stay home and not support Biden and make it more likely that Trump is going to win, That's the kind of cynicism that I'm talking about. It's that you either satisfy my needs or I'm walking. And I get it. What's going on in Gaza is horrific. I've tweeted about it. I've done Instagram posts about it. I've written about it. I've spoken about it. It is horrific. But the idea that there is anyone on the other side that is going to do a better job of that, and Cornel West ain't going to be president.
Yeah.
Jill Stein is not going to be president, right? Well, AOC, who's not even in the race, is not going to be president. Like, it is going to be one of those two people in all likelihood. And one of them doesn't even think the Palestinians are a people at all. And the other one needs to be persuaded to be a hell of a lot harder on the state of Israel for the way they're treating Palestinians. But there's a difference. And I say that as somebody who believes in a ceasefire. And I'm angry that we're not going to likely get one anytime soon. I wish I was wrong about that. I hope we will. But this idea that you're going to withhold and that's going to teach a lesson to the Democrats somehow. You know, there's this childishness that is also at the heart of the anger about the anti-democratic tendency, which is, and I hear it all the time on the left, they need to earn my vote. Okay, I get that. I would love people to earn my vote. But here's the problem. In order to really earn my vote, you would have to support a lot of shit that I know is not the majority opinion.
Right.
I just know that it's not. Some people on the left think everybody's with us. It's like that Michael Moore thing where Michael Moore for years would say like 80% of the country are progressives. Get your head out of your ass. No, they're not. Certainly not white folks, certainly not in the key swing states. I realize if you just take an aggregate poll, you might find 70-something% of Democratic voters support a ceasefire or 78% support single payer health care. But you need to show me the breakdowns by congressional district before you get angry at congresspersons for not being able to go for that position in Congress. You need to be able to show me with the electoral college numbers in front of you what the breakdowns are in those particular states. Because if you want to come in and get my vote and people on the left, I guarantee you will probably alienate 1.5 to 2 people that you need on the other side. So politics is always about compromise. It is not about getting everything that you want.
Yeah, it's very hard for people to realize that and learn it. And sometimes even when they learn it, they unlearn it. But letting the perfect be the enemy of the good when it comes to decreasing gun violence. I mean, I get the passion behind everything, every cause. I've been involved in the grassroots with many of them, but I've learned exactly what you're saying. And there is a naivete amongst especially young people. But I think what I'm also hearing you're saying more specifically is I understand why people are mad and why they're scared. But the problem is that they blame the wrong root causes for the reason that health insurance or food or gas is too high. And that's watered into their ears by their favorite commentator who actually does not have any idea how government works. And most importantly,
it wasn't democracy that gave us those problems, right? If we had more democracy would mean that those people would have more say about what goes on in their workplace democracy. They would have more say about what goes on at the local political level. The problem isn't too much democracy, it's too little. So whether it's corporate power concentrated in the hands of a few that is highly anti-democratic, whether it's money in politics that skews the outcomes and the concerns of politicians and the way that they vote. Here in Tennessee, we have a absolute collapse of democracy. We got lawmakers in the state house throwing out elected young black men who were in the legislature because they led a protest against gun violence on the floor of the state legislature. And they're trying to overturn everything that Nashville tries to do where I live, because as a red state, they don't want blue cities to be able to govern blue or to govern in any way progressive. So the problems of powerlessness for average everyday people are real. The idea that the source of that problem is too much democracy is an inversion of reality. And that's what the Democratic Party needs to be clearer on. Talk less about the party and more about what democracy looks like. And not just, Trump as a threat to it, but voting rights and the importance of securing voting rights, and not just rights, but actual access. Workplace democracy, the union movement, which is really now experiencing a renaissance unlike anything in my lifetime, my adult lifetime for sure. Yep. That's about democracy. Everything should be about democracy versus authoritarianism. And the Democrats, even though they are far from perfect on those things, my God, clearly not perfect on it, but that's the message. And I just don't think that they understand that. Joe Biden is still out there talking about Bidenomics. Shut up. It is not about that. It is not about that. That is not going to help you to talk about how inflation is cooling. You know, that's just not a winning message.
The bottom line seems to be when it comes to this, and we've talked about this before, but I always come back to it, is this idea, certainly that Reagan perpetuated to begin with, that government is the problem and it's never the solution, in which, of course, we can all make arguments as to what's wrong with government, the corruption, and when it goes wrong and when it goes too far and so on. But I got to have somebody protect me from predatory loans and scammers and regulations and bullets and pollution. I mean, somebody's got to do it. This government ain't perfect. They're not doing a good enough job, but it's definitely not going to be the guy running the bank, the coal mine, or the bullet factory. Those guys aren't.
Or you know, a lot of people on the right now talk about how much they hate big pharma, right? And there's a lot to be angry at pharmaceuticals about, right? But okay, would you rather have those guys making all the decisions about what drugs to go to market and when or if they'll be tested? Do you want hedge fund managers making these decisions? Do you want big pharma, big tech? Talk about big tech is tyrannical. Okay, but those aren't elected people, right? Those are private.
Well, you know,
people.
the opposite of big pharma is the multi-billion-dollar, quote, natural food and supplement industry, which is unregulated by the FDA, and which millions of people buy that shit and take it and think it's helping them. And at best, it doesn't help them, and they're just wasting their money. And maybe it's placebo, good for you. But at worst, it's bad for you, and it's not regulated, and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and that is not right. We don't want that, I think.
Well, and the best part of that, other than how rich it's made Alex Jones, which is the only one who really benefits from selling the supplements, guys like that.
No,
right?
well, I mean, no. Come on, Joe Rogan, a lot of podcasters.
Alex Jones and people like him. That's how they make their money. I mean, obviously, the Spotify deal makes Joe Rogan a lot of money.
No, but I mean, there's a lot of progressives on the radio. I take a lot of pride and I don't advertise. A lot of my progressive friends sell shit they know doesn't work for your dick, for your health, for your brain. Oh, your memory will be better if you take this. Shut up, stupid.
No, I know. And it's permeated media culture. When I was in discussions with some folks at Sirius years ago for a show, as I think I talked about with you at the time. Sure. And one of the things I said that I think sank the deal was I have to pick the advertiser.
Yeah, that'll do it. Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming in, Tim. That's
exactly what happened. You know, I said, I won't do this, and this. And they're like, it was nice knowing you. It was good taking you to dinner, you know, but we're not doing this. And I understand it. So yes, first of all that stuff is unregulated. And what's so funny to me is when people act like, okay, those pharmaceuticals, they're only in it for the money. But what you think, are they giving these supplements away for free? Is that shit free? Does it just like drop from some magical like supplement fairy that'll bring it to me for nothing? No, they're making money hand over fist. So why isn't that about the money? Why isn't that greedy profit motive?
Because it's natural. Because it's natural, sir.
Right.
Because it is natural. I grinded all this up and I put it in a capsule. What is it? It's soil.
Right. It's dirt in a pill. Yes, it's dirt.
It may have some peat moss in it, but it's
got turmeric.
Oh, turmeric. The qualities of turmeric. What does that? I mean, your memory, it fights all the things. Everything's everything boosts your immunity now. Everything boosts your immunity. I don't think anything really does, but everything does.
Yeah, everything except for any medicines that are, you know, concocted by
except for the miracle of vaccines. That is the best thing in public health.
Right. The point being, look, again, getting back to it, the issue is that, yes, there is too much power in the hands of too few. Yep. But at least with some of those few, we get a chance to vote for them. And the others are not elected. They operate on $1, one vote. Right? Not one person, one vote, $1, one vote. So if you got a lot of money, I get why you might want some Milton Friedman-esque libertarian, like Argentina, right, has just elected this guy who's a hardcore libertarian who wants to get rid of all regulations, wants to get rid of unions, wants to get rid of environmental laws, all labor laws, and go to this sort of Ayn Randian, libertarian, objectivist, you know, Galt's Gulch or whatever, you know, from Ayn Rand's book. We'll see how that works out. But there's never been a country in the history of the world or even a community in the history of the world for whom that shit worked very long.
No,
you know, because the powerful will abuse their power, and private power more so than public power, because private power only has to answer to money. Public power, at least in theory, has to answer to people. And if it's not doing that, it's because we have too little democracy, not too much democracy.
Beautifully said. Want to ask you about the Middle East conflict, how closely you're following it. It seems like it's bookended by the October 7th terrorist attack by Hamas and the horror of those killings and the hostage taking, which of course lasted and continues on to today in late December, where they've destroyed Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces have just flattened it, and thousands and thousands of people have died. And, based on what media you look at, we're so focused on the atrocities of October 7th and the hostages, and I think there's space for that. But it does not seem like there's a lot of attention being paid to the victims of Gaza. And for a lot of reasons, the Arab world has always treated them terribly, and so has the West, and so is the world. And it's a complicated and confusing thing. But at this point, Tim, it just seems like world's public opinion has turned so strongly against Israel. And even if you didn't know anything about anything, you'd just be like, man, is that still going? And you see a few pictures, you hear a few things, you see the dead children, you hear the families, and it just seems very, very bad at this point for our Israeli friends. And I mean that in the most sincere way. It's a really bad for that country and their people. And
for everyone. I mean, it is an unfolding genocide in Gaza, whether we want to use that term or not. The UN definition of it fits. I realize that the Hamas charter is also genocidal, so I'm not suggesting that their hands are clean by any stretch, for God's sake. But what fascinates me about this is Israel's ability to shoot itself in the foot. If you're concerned about the safety of Jews in Israel or anywhere else, which they tell us they are, that's all I heard growing up in Hebrew school, was this was the place where we were going to be safe. And in fact, it may be the least safe place, at least on October 7th it was, because the head of state and a number of people in that military decided to ignore the intelligence reports that said, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. But they ignored it. And you know why they ignored it? Two reasons. Number one, the intelligence came from a female intelligence officer, and there's a significant amount of misogyny involved in dismissing her.
Really? I never heard that. Really? You really think that?
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any, and I've heard several people who know about Israeli intelligence forces and say that was part of it. There was a dismissiveness because of who brought the information. It's like, little lady, move away, that you don't know what you're talking about. But even more importantly, it's that sort of cultural and racial supremacy aspect, or cultural supremacy aspect, that says Hamas isn't sophisticated enough to pull this off. We're Israel. They can never do this to us. We're strong. They're weak. This will never happen. That is the kind of hubris that Israel has always manifested because they've been allowed to. And now what happens is not just that you've got tens of thousands of dead Palestinians, half of them kids in Gaza, which is horrific enough, but those Israelis are now starting to realize, wait a minute, our government helped to make sure that Hamas received funds from Qatar. Our government knew that this attack was going to happen. Our government and our military killed at least those 3 hostages that we know of, who were apparently waving a white flag, and they got shot anyway. That's fascinating. Why? And I'm sure the IDF would say, well, we thought they were Hamas. Well, they were surrendering. So so you're saying it's okay to shoot surrendering Palestinians, but oh gosh, sorry, it was our people. No, that just demonstrates the depravity. We're seeing video after video right now on social media of not just what the IDF is doing, but gleefully talking about the villages that they're wiping out, gleefully talking about the people that they're killing. And what we've really noticed in the last week, right, with Netanyahu now, it's on the record. He's like, I've done a great job preventing the formation of a Palestinian state, bragging about the fact that he and his government have been the blockage for that. Keep in mind the argument that Israel always makes about Hamas or about Fatah, about any Palestinian group, about the Palestinian Authority, has always been, we can't work with them because they won't acknowledge the existence of and recognize the existence of the state of Israel. Well, now the Israeli head of state is saying, I don't ever want to see a Palestinian state. So you're asking them to acknowledge your state, and you refuse to allow them to even have a state. And we're supposed to talk about like that's a legitimate moral and ethical position. It's not moral, it's not ethical, and it's not practical. It's getting Jews killed. It is intensifying anti-Semitism around the globe. The worst thing that you want to do, if you're, growing up Jewish, the one thing I always heard was, oh, you guys all stick together. You're very clannish, and sort of conspiratorial thinking. All the Jews are in it. They're just in it for themselves. And that, of course, is anti-Semitic bullshit. But Israel makes it believable for some people when they do this shit, when they say they speak for all of us And then anyone who speaks out of turn, anyone who questions it, as I do as an anti-Zionist Jew, is then accused of being self-hating or anti-Semitic, right? Oh, you're just an outlier. It's you and like 15 other people. Well, no, Jewish Voice for Peace is not 15 people. They actually have more followers on Twitter than the state of Israel does. So
I saw that.
There's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of us who feel this way. But if you try to shut down dissent within the Jewish community around this issue, which Israel and their supporters are trying to do, you actually reinforce the very conspiratorial bullshit that Jew haters have always spewed. The smartest thing that Israel and even its supporters could do would be to encourage this discussion and debate and to bring facts and evidence and not just the same recycled rhetoric over and over again about October 7. We know the horrors of October 7, and we should never forget the horrors of October 7. We should also never forget the reason that it happened is not just the depravity of Hamas. The reason it happened is because of the indifference of the Israeli government. The indifference of Benjamin Netanyahu and the people in his governmental coalition who allowed it to happen. They have blood on their hands, and they should all be removed from power.
Well, you didn't mention, and there's been a lot of reporting, that also Netanyahu and many in his governments, various governments, have in many ways supported Hamas because of the role that they play in the power structure of Palestinian people, because it keeps them divided between the West Bank and Hamas and Gaza, and keeps them divided within the Palestinian people themselves. There's been a lot of reporting that Netanyahu.
Well, that's why they had the Qatari money, right? I mentioned the Qatari money.
Oh, got it.
That they didn't turn that spigot off, even though they were asked, like, do you want us to keep funding Hamas, giving this money? Yes, absolutely. And there's been a long pattern of that going back to the first time Netanyahu was in power, actually, of supporting Hamas, or the second time, I guess, supporting Hamas at the expense of the PA, thinking that the PA was the bigger threat, right? And so we'll empower these people because the PA is too strong and we don't want them to get strong. And then this is what happens, all because you refuse to acknowledge the Palestinian people as a people who are indigenous to that land and have a right to a state as well as you claim that you do. And so all of that to prevent a state which you say, and it's the Israeli government says, well, we've offered them these great deals and they've turned them down. We don't have a partner to negotiate with. Well, neither do they, clearly, because if what you're saying is no matter what we negotiate, it ain't going to be a state, then you're not operating in good faith. You're a bad faith actor. You're not serious about negotiations, and you should be removed from government. You should be, this is someone who doesn't deserve one more minute in office. And unfortunately, he's going to probably hang on until the end of the war, whatever that means.
Yeah, he should be removed from the office for the crimes he committed.
He should be in jail. Right. He should be in prison first. Yeah.
It's so crazy how the parallels between people like him and Trump and Bolsonaro and others who, have to maintain power, or else they might have to be in jail, living in jail.
Absolutely.
So I want to ask you about one more issue that I know that you are ahead of than most people are. I had no idea even about this federal government agency called the Minority Business Development Agency. But you know a lot about this agency and their work. Here is a piece from news called Inc.com. The Minority Business Development Agency is the latest target in the wave of anti-diversity, equity, inclusion lawsuits recently filed by conservative groups. The agency could get dissolved completely. The MBDA, which falls under the Department of Commerce, helps level the business playing field for minority-owned companies by providing technical assistance, helping companies raise money, and more. President Nixon, Richard Nixon, created it in 1969. President Joe Biden's bipartisan infrastructure bill gave the agency permanent status in 2021, and now the Minority Business Development Agency finds itself in the crosshairs of three small business owners, these white guys who launched their lawsuit back in March, arguing that the MBDA is unlawful because it sets aside aid only for minority-owned businesses. Tim, what do you make of this? How big of a deal is it?
Well, it doesn't really set aside money only for minority businesses. What it does,
that's what they say. I'm sorry, that's what I was reading there.
The name may be suggestive of that, but really, what all of these disadvantaged business enterprise programs are, and there's one in commerce, there's one that's been in the Small Business Administration, there's another one in maybe the Ag Department, I can't remember, but there have been several of them over the years. some of which have been scaled back already. What they do is any disadvantaged business, even one owned by a white guy, if you can demonstrate that you have faced some type of economic disadvantage or whatever, you can still qualify for assistance under those programs. And there have been companies that have done that. But what the programs do, and there's a good reason for it, and this is what they're really angry about, is there is a presumption of disadvantage that attaches, for instance, if you're a black-owned business or if you're a Latino-owned business. And for some of them, it depends. Different departments run it differently. Some, if you're a woman-owned business. And they're angry about the presumption because they're saying, well, that's unfair. If you presume, they don't have to prove it. It's just presumed that if you're a black-owned business, you're at a disadvantage. Well, the problem, I know that may sound weird to people, and you may say, like, well, you're giving a burden of proof to white guys, but no burden of proof over here. The difference is, first of all, history happened, and we can actually trace the consequences. We know what the wealth data says, what the venture capital data says, what the loan data says about the disadvantages that black-owned businesses, for instance, actually do face. It's not some fantasy. Now, is it possible that some of those businesses that get assistance through that program might not have needed it because they had plenty of cash? I suppose. But here's the thing. If you get rid of the presumption of disadvantage, which some people might not like the sound of, you're now replacing it, in effect, with the presumption of level playing field. Which of those things is more rational? Is it more rational to think we're all on an even playing field and we should assume that? Or, you know what, we're probably not, and all the aggregate evidence tells us we're not? It seems pretty obvious that you should have that presumption in place. Now, should we make it possibly easier for truly disadvantaged businesses owned by white guys that have faced some type of, maybe they grew up in poverty, whatever. Yes, the Appalachian-owned company that wants this, of course, we should make it where they can maybe make it easier for them to prove. But the idea that we ought to get rid of this is just part of this right-wing attack on anything that smacks of diversity or equity initiatives, any attempt to level the playing field, because what they really want to do, and Ben Shapiro has said it, the Prager University people have said it, it doesn't get nearly enough attention. They have said they want to actually get rid of anti-discrimination laws altogether in the private sector. They want to ban them supposedly in the government sector, but what they really want to do is repeal the 1964 Civil Rights Act so that companies can, if they choose, discriminate against black folks at the hotel, at the restaurant, or wherever, and LGBTQ folks or women as women or Muslims as Muslims. They want you to be able to discriminate. And the only way you can possibly sell that, though, to the American people, because most people, if they heard that you want to overturn one of the key elements of the civil rights movement, would be like, wait a minute, that's a little too far. The only way they can sell people on that agenda is by making everyone think that we're at a level playing field. So we don't need that anymore, right? Because if you thought you needed it, you would oppose that attempt. You'd be like, well, we can't get rid of the Civil Rights Act, for God's sake.
Sure. Well, they have gotten rid of a lot of parts of the Voting Rights Act as a result of we don't need it anymore, right?
Right. Their intentions are very, very clear.
Yep.
And it's just a dishonest argument. This idea that we should just presume a level playing field, that we should act as if we have this objective way to determine the merit of a company coming forward for a loan, when certain companies, through no fault of their own, are undercapitalized because they don't have the connections at the bank. They don't know someone who's able to introduce them to a venture capitalist. I mean, there is a substantial systemic and structural disadvantage, which is part of the reason that the wealth gaps continue to be what they are, roughly 10-1 for the typical white household versus typical black household. That's not because of a lack of initiative. It is because of a lack of access to capital. You can either choose to believe those numbers matter and they ought to be part of our policymaking, or you can just act like they don't matter at all. Not that they don't exist, but yeah, they exist, but we're just not going to think about them, and we're just going to act like they don't mean anything. It just doesn't make any sense.
And there's just so much unprovable discrimination and racism when it comes to, even now, lending and the raising of money. Maybe I'm just really open-minded. I'm really not a racist person, but I got this money and I want to invest in somebody's company, but I don't know. I just feel like maybe the black family is not going to do as well as this Asian family or this white family or whatever it is. And if those things, whether they be a little more innocent, a little less pernicious, they do exist, which is why you do still need, it seems like, systems to be able to accommodate or compensate for, in this case, businesses to be able to get funding, opportunity, property, mortgage, et cetera. I'm just guessing.
Well,
I don't mean
one of the great examples historically is, if you're a lender or you're a venture capitalist or you're a bank and people come to you wanting money for a startup or to expand their business, it makes perfect sense that you would want to look at their level of capitalization. You would want to know all who their customers have been. And if you've had more of a history because you had access to capital, you had access to connections, of course, you're going to look better on paper. It doesn't mean that your business plan is better. It doesn't mean that you couldn't do a good job if you had the resources. But if I'm looking at it, I might say, God, I'd love to lend. Like you said, you might not be a racist in the old school sense. I'd love to lend to this guy or this Latina who owns this business of hers, but I just don't. She just doesn't have as much experience, and she hasn't had as many customers, and she doesn't have the same number of vendors. Well, of course not. That's the whole problem, right? If that money were available, though, it might be possible for her to be able to get to a place where then she could move away from that program and then let the next one coming up who's disadvantaged take advantage of it. But it's just ironic to hear people who talk about how much they love capitalism wanting to make it harder for black and brown capitalists to be capitalists. It's fascinating.
Another amazing conversation. We've had so many, and I'm so grateful to you for all of them and looking forward to more in 2024, I guess is the name of the next year. But before I do let you go, next week is a week that I named, and it has stuck, Taint Week. It's the week between Christmas and New Year's. It needs a name. It needs a purpose. Nothing gets done, people say. It's the worst time, actually, to travel, to go anywhere because everybody's doing it because they have the time off and it's getting cold and so on. But it's important that we recognize it for what it is, and it's different for each person. But do you have any traditional definition or purpose or responsibilities during your Taint Week after Christmas, before New Year's? What happens for you, Tim, next week? Does the world stop?
My policy is never to talk about my taint, but I will talk about the week. I normally, to be honest with you, have always looked at that week as the week when I just sort of hibernate. I don't do much of anything. I rarely travel during that week. The only reason I might this time is that I'm about $1,000 short of getting higher status on Delta, and then that'll save me money next year because I'll get upgrades and things like that and all these different perks. So I may have to take a trip here because Delta's made it so much harder to get that next level.
You're going to take a trip during Taint Week just to fit it in?
I might, just to go and come back. Like it may be I might fly to the West Coast and fly back and put it on a credit card, waste $1,000 just so I can get this.
There are a lot of listeners who would love to meet you and have drinks. So maybe we could put out a bidding war.
A video that says, come see Tim for Taint Week. I'm sure that's a great.
Well, it sounds like your taint's going to be very active during Taint Week.
Well, I don't know. But I may not do anything. Like I'm literally, as we're sitting here, I'm cooking in a crock pot. That's how exciting my life is. I'm making
exactly what should and normally does occur for most people during that week. A lot of slow cooking, a lot of slothy behavior.
I'm doing that, and I'm looking forward to New Year's. The place I'm in is it's in Nashville, and it's got a view of downtown where the fireworks will be going off. Wonderful. So I'll be able to see them.
People will kill me if I don't ask what's in that crock pot.
Oh, right now it's like a lentil soup. I mean, it's very basic. I made white chili the other day, and I made red beans before that. I'm on like a slow cooking jag right now. So,
all right, well, that's the time of year for it, and we look forward to you sharing those recipes if you feel.
I'll be happy to.
We'll include it in the show notes.
I put like 3 times the cayenne in the red beans that I was supposed to. Oops. Happy accident. I wasn't really sorry about it, but anyone else who would have tried it probably would have burned their taint. I'll just say that.
You posted that and said I put too much in by accident. Oops. Sorry, not sorry. And I was like, this guy's crazy over here.
Yeah, and then people were telling me like how to take down the heat. I'm like, you missed the joke. Yeah. I don't care.
No,
I like the fact.
Loves it.
I loved it. It was fantastic. So I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm going to do. I hope your holidays are great and that your week between is a good one. And I'll check in with you after this year, this rotten, no good year is over.
We look forward to hearing and seeing a lot more from you in 2024. Tim, thank you so much for the several appearances this year, and look forward to next. Thank you very much, my friend.
You bet. Thank you.
All right, there he goes, Tim Wise. I take it that'll be his last appearance of the year. I guess that just made sense. Comes on about once a month, every other week sometimes, but we love when he does. So good. Always great. Reach out to him, connect with him on social media, and hopefully we'll see him on Substack, TikTok, and everywhere else next year, because his voice really does matter and always want to have it. Welcome here on Stand Up. So thank you very much. I can't put mine out there and showcase these brilliant minds that I do every day that we get to learn from without your support. So please subscribe with as little as $5 a month. You can pay more if you want. Many of you do and have, and I'm super grateful for it because we've got about 700 paying subscribers. The goal has always been to get to about 3,000, and people come and they go, but many of you have stayed for a really long time, and you are my bumblebees, you folks who listen all the way to the end. And I hope to see you tonight at our hangout as well as in Vegas in March. And go stream that stand-up special, drybarcomedy.com/Pete. John Carroll will be in Vegas. Can't wait to see him and watch him perform live for us. This song and so much more. Take it away, Johnny. Thanks for listening, folks. See you tomorrow.
Off of your butt, down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Where the money all went, it'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run